Okay, in this video I'm going to show you how to take the blanks that you've cut out for your bowl and how to glue those together and then get them set up to put on the lathe. So first of all, before you can even start with any of this, you have to have both of your pieces cut. So what I have here is a nice piece of cherry that's about 3.5 inches thick, and it is about maybe 6 inches in diameter. That's a pretty good diameter for making your bowl. And the other thing I have done already is I've taken it on the belt sander and I've smoothed the bottom of the bowl. So you need to take one, either the bottom or the top, and you need to smooth that out on the belt sander so it's nice and flat, nice and smooth, so we can get a good surface to glue against. So, and then also a nice thing to do is to take the belt sander and also just kind of round these outside edges and clean those up so they're not so rough when you start putting them on the lathe. The other thing I have here is I have a piece of 3/4 inch plywood. This is usually, I like to use some nicer stuff. This is just some maple or birch plywood, and it's the same diameter as the bowl, and this will allow us to glue to the bowl to help hold the plate on so that we can put it on the lathe. So you want to find a better quality plywood. Don't use some junky stuff, otherwise it's going to end up, the screws aren't going to hold as well. It's not going to glue up as well to our bowl piece. The other things I have here is I have some paper, because what we're actually going to do is put paper in between the two when we glue them. Later on, and after you're done turning your bowl on the lathe, that's going to allow us to actually chisel the two apart, and then you'll have a nice bottom with no screw holes or anything like that in the bottom of it. I also have my just regular wood glue. You don't need anything more than that. Just regular tight bond wood glue, and then I have some clamps here that we're going to use, and I also have some paper towels to kind of clean some things up at the end. One thing to note, when you are gluing them, I'll show you up close here so you can see a little bit better. You want to make sure that when you glue the two pieces together, you glue them as flush as possible along the top and along the bottom. If they're like this, it's not going to spin straight on the lathe, and that's going to cause it to be very wobbly on the lathe, and it's going to make your bowl get smaller and smaller and smaller. So you want to make sure that when you glue them up, you get them as close to flush as possible. Now I have this piece of plywood cut just a little bit bigger than my bowl, but you want to get them as close as possible. It's going to be kind of slippery, it's going to be hard to hold, but if you use the table to help you a little bit, that'll make things a little easier. But make sure you get them as flush as you possibly can when you're gluing them up. So I'm just going to take my wood glue and I'm just going to kind of spread it on the base of my bowl, and then I'm just going to take my finger and I'm going to spread it around all the way around here. I want to make sure I get it all the way to the edges. There's really no sense in going sparingly with the glue here. You got to put plenty on to make sure that you get a good bond, good enough bond to the piece of plywood. So that's pretty good there. If anything, I can probably scrape a little bit off and put a little bit onto my plywood. And then I'm also going to do the exact same thing to the plywood. Spread some on there and kind of spread it around again using my finger and making sure I get it all the way to the edges. And that's pretty good right there. That's why it's nice to have some paper towels. You kind of wipe your fingers clean a little bit before you put this thing together. So next step that I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my paper and I'm going to lay the paper right on top of one of the pieces. Okay? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my other piece of plywood and I'm going to lay that down right on top. So we're kind of making a sandwich with the paper in the middle. Now I'm going to get my clamps ready. Just make sure you have your clamps around before you start doing all this, otherwise you're going to get hurrying at the end, and that's not always a good thing to do. I always like to just lay it on the table like this. That way I ensure that my bottom edge is flush because it sits right on the table. And I'm just going to take one clamp and I'm just going to tighten it up relatively tight. I'm not going to go super tight yet. And while I'm doing this, I'm kind of checking my edges to make sure that they are staying flush. Okay, I don't want it to slide away on me. Then I'm going to end up not having my edges flush here. So then I'm going to take another clamp, again keeping it on the table. This kind of ensures everything to stay together nice. And I'm going to take my other clamp, and a nice thing to do with this is you're going to alternate which side the tightener is on. So if I always go on the same side, it's really hard to get a good grip on there, okay? So then I'm going to alternate on this side, and I'm going to put this one down. And again, I'm not going to over tighten these yet. I'm just starting to get it tight so that just to make sure everything is holding together. Again, I'll alternate the side I put the clamp on. Just allows me to be able to tighten them a little bit easier. And I'm going to use 4. I think that's a pretty good amount to use. And then the last one here, I come in and I'm going to put this one down as well. And again, I alternate which side. That way I don't have all 4 tightening knobs over on one side. That makes it really hard to get it super tight. So once I have it pretty close to where I think I want it, I'm just going to double check to make sure that I have everything nice and flush. I can start removing some of my paper so I can see a little bit better of what I have going on here. So as you can see here, I've got it glued up and I've got the edges nice and flush, okay, with the bowl and the plywood. Okay, it's about as close as I can get. Once I have it exactly where I want it, I'm going to start tightening all of these up. Now, a lot of you guys, when you put clamps on, you don't tighten them very tight. You just kind of put them, that's good enough. You have to get these clamps tight. If you don't get them tight, there's a much higher likelihood that this is going to break apart when you're spinning it on the lathe. Okay, so you want to make sure you get them good and tight right here to help this joint hold together better. So I'm just going to slowly start working my way around, getting all of them tight. I always tell students put them as tight as you can put them, and then put them even a little bit tighter than that. So that just kind of means you want to get them really tight. We want that glue oozing out of there a little bit. That's pretty good right there. So now, it's not going to be perfect, but it should be pretty close to being flush. Right along here is where we want it nice and flush. Okay, so just make that as good as you can get. Once you have that done, you got to let it sit overnight, and then the next day you can come back and put the plate on. And once this glue dries and sets up, then I will show you how to put the plate on and get it ready for to be turned on the lathe. So once you've waited overnight for your glue to dry on your bowl, you can take the clamps off, and the next thing I'm going to show you is how to put the plates on so that you can then thread it on the lathe. So take the clamps off, pretty easy. Set those out of the way. And you'll also now be able to see a little closer as to the type of glue up that I have. So you can see that paper right in the middle, and then you can also see how I got it pretty flush here on this outside edge. That will help this bowl spin a lot straighter on the lathe, allowing me to keep it as big as possible. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this device right here. It's called a center finder, and I'm going to slide that on here, and that is going to allow me to find the center of this this circle here. So if you look, there's some little grooves in the outside edge of this this center finder. That's going to slide right up on there like so, and then I would just draw a straight line right on there, rotate it about 90 degrees, hold it in place, and draw a straight line like so. Now when I remove it, that is very close to the center of my bowl. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it should be close. Again, that's going to make your bowl spin straighter on the lathe, which is going to allow it to be, which is going to allow you to keep it as big as you possibly can when you're making your bowl. So now I'm going to take my plates. These are the two plates that I have. We have multiple sizes. If you're doing a smaller bowl, you can use a smaller plate like this. A bigger bowl, you can use a bigger plate like this. And if you look, there's threads on the insides of these, and that is what's actually going to thread right into the lathe and hold the bowl on the lathe. So I'm going to use this bigger plate, but you certainly can use a smaller plate as well. 4 screws is enough for this. You don't really need more than 4. I'm just going to put them on the outside edges, or the outside holes. The screws you're going to want usually are in a box, nice and easy for you, labeled bowl. That makes it as easy as possible for you to know which ones you're going to want. This is a good size. It's a 1-inch wood screw. It also has the Phillips head on there, and that is a number 3 Phillips. It's going to require a number 3 Phillips bit. If you don't use the correct bit, it will strip out when you are trying to thread it on. So here I have a number 2 driver bit, and it's loose in there. Okay, that's going to strip out. So you don't want to use a number 2 bit. You're going to want to use one like this. It is a number 3 bit. It's much bigger, and that is going to be fit in that screw a whole lot better. So that's the screw, or that's the bit you're going to want to use to make sure that the screw does not strip out. So you get 4 screws out. Don't use the ones that are too long. Some of them mixed in the box are like 1.5 inches. You don't want to use the 1.5 inch ones because those are going to go all the way through your 3/4 inch plywood and put a hole in the bottom of your bowl. So you don't want those. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the hole here. I'm going to try to get that in the center of the X that I made, so as close as I can, so I can get this plate centered up as best as possible. Take your impact driver, and you can put your screws in. Do not over tighten the screws, or you will strip the threads out inside of the plywood, and then they're not going to hold up as well. So you just want to put them snug, tight. Don't keep threading them in so that they go too tight. Hold the plate with the left hand and just drive it in with your right hand, pushing down good so that the threads catch onto the plywood. Okay, don't over tighten it, especially when you're first putting them in. Just get them snug. And then I go across to the other hole on the other side. Put 2 more in. Make sure I have them snugged up, just like that. So now we have our plate screwed onto the plywood here, which is glued onto the bowl. So we have our system ready to go, and now you can just take this over to the lathe. You can thread it onto the lathe, and you can start turning out your bowl. So that is the process to get your bowl ready to be able to put